There is a kind of love that teaches you how to disappear. You don't notice it happening. You just wake up one day and realize you can no longer find yourself in the reflection. And the strangest part is that you don't remember exactly when it started. There was no single moment, no door that closed, just a slow, quiet fading like a photograph left too long in the sun. You are still there, but something essential has grown pale. You have been trying to explain it for years to your sister, to your best friend, to yourself at 3 in the morning when the quiet becomes too loud to ignore. And even then, the words never come out right because what happened to you does not have clean edges. It cannot be summarized. It cannot be filed away under one category and closed. It lives in the body, in the way you still flinch at a certain tone of voice, in the way you still apologize before you've done anything wrong, in the way you read the room before you even enter it. Why did you stay? Why did you go back? Why, even now, after everything, does part of you still reach for them? These questions have probably kept you up at night. They have probably made you feel like something is fundamentally wrong with you, like you are the problem, like if you were stronger, smarter, more self-aware, none of this would have happened. But that is not the truth. People will tell you it was weakness. They will call it codependency, poor choices, low self-esteem. They will hand you labels like medicine, as if a word can repair something that was slowly torn apart over months, over years, over 1,000 quiet moments, each one small enough to explain away, each one just barely survivable. But that is not the full truth. And somewhere deep inside you, you already know that. Today, we are going to talk about what really happens when you love someone who keeps hurting you, not the surface version, not the version that makes you sound foolish, not the version people give advice about. From the outside, the one underneath, the real one, the one that lives in the part of you that has never quite healed, the one you have never fully said out loud. It never starts with pain. Let me be very clear about that. It never starts with cruelty or coldness or anything you would immediately recognize as harm. It starts with warmth. It starts with being seen, not partially seen, not seen the way most people see you, through the performance, through the role you play, through the version of yourself you present, because it is easier, because it is safer, because showing the real thing has not always gone well. No, this person somehow saw through all of that, and they stayed. There is something almost impossible to explain. Unless you have lived it, you feel chosen, not in a small way, in a way that reaches something you did not know was still waiting to be reached. You feel like someone looked directly at you, not the version that performs, not the version that smiles and copes and keeps everything moving, but the real you, the one who doubts, the unguarded one, the slightly broken one, the one who has been quietly carrying things for a very long time. And they didn't leave. They stayed and asked questions and remembered the answers and came back. And in that staying, something in you softened in a way it never had before. A door opened that you had spent years learning to keep closed. And that opening felt like arriving somewhere, like finally being home in another person. This is the first wound, not what came after. This moment, because the wound is not the harm they caused you. The wound is how completely you let them in. Because once someone becomes your definition of safety, once your nervous system registers them as necessary, you will do anything to keep that feeling alive. Even when they stop being safe, even when the warmth becomes unpredictable, even when you find yourself adjusting your behavior, choosing your words carefully, reading the atmosphere before you speak, without ever consciously deciding to do any of it. You don't leave someone who made you feel safe, not when that safety was the first real safety you had known, not when the alternative is returning to the version of yourself that existed before them. You negotiate, you explain, you try harder, you become smaller, you convince yourself that the version you fell in love with is the real one. The other version is just stress, just fear, just something they are going through, and everything else is temporary, something you can help them through, something love can fix if you just love them well enough. This is not weakness. This is not stupidity. This is not a character flaw. This is your nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do, trying to protect what it believes you need to survive. And that is how the attachment forms, quietly, deeply, without asking your permission. There is a cycle in these relationships. Psychologists have written about it, studied it, named it, and yet no one ever explains it in a way that makes you feel understood. So let me try. First, there is tension, a slow tightening. Something feels off. Before anything is said, your body always notices first. Before your mind catches up, your shoulders have already risen. Your breathing has already changed. You are already measuring, how do they seem today? What kind of mood is this? Is it safe to speak? Is it safe to be fully here? You start adjusting without thinking, speaking carefully, laughing less, choosing the words that won't land wrong, breathing differently, making yourself just a little smaller, just a little quieter, just in case. This is not something you decided to do. It is something you learned to do, slowly, automatically, to survive. Then something breaks. It might be an argument, a cold silence that fills the whole room, a tone that should not have been used, a look, a dismissal, something small enough that if you mentioned it to someone else, they might say, "You are being too sensitive." But you felt it. You felt the shift, and something inside you collapses just a little every time. Then comes the part that confuses everything. The repair, they come back. The kindness returns. The warmth, the attention, the version of them that made you fall in love is suddenly present again. Sometimes even an apology, a genuine one, or something that feels genuine enough that you choose to believe it, and your body responds immediately, not with joy, with relief, a deep, bone-level, overwhelming relief, the kind that makes your shoulders drop, the kind that makes you exhale, something you have been holding for days, and that relief feels like love. It feels like everything is okay. It feels like you were right to stay. It feels like this is what you were waiting for. But what is actually happening neurologically is something much more complicated. This cycle creates a form of dependency that is not about weakness. The unpredictability of affection, sometimes warm, sometimes cold, sometimes present, sometimes gone, activates the same reward pathways in the brain as a gambling habit. You are not waiting for love, you are waiting for relief. And the brain has learned that relief is coming eventually, so it keeps waiting, it keeps hoping, it keeps tolerating to get to the next moment of warmth. You are not weak, you are conditioned by something that was not your fault to wait for the next moment of relief. And here is the hardest truth, the one no one prepares you for. The bond deepens, not in the stable moments, not in the easy ones, not in the good days, when everything feels right. It deepens in the rupture and the repair, because that is when you feel most chosen. After the storm, when they come back, when they choose you again, after having made you feel almost discarded, that choosing feels more powerful than any consistent kindness ever could, because it came at a cost, because you survived something to get to it. And we attach most deeply to the things we have survived for. You are not holding on to the person, you are holding on to who they become when they come back to you. You are holding on to the feeling of being chosen again. And that is the trap, a beautiful, painful, invisible trap. At some point, without a decision, without a conscious choice, you began to change. Not all at once, not in any way that was obvious, but consistently, layer by layer, like water, slowly reshaping stone. You started taking responsibility for their emotional world. If they were distant, you searched for what you had done wrong. If they were cold, you softened yourself further. If they were unkind, you found the explanation. Their past, their pain, their fear, their wounds. You became fluent in the language of their suffering. You could read every signal, every shift in tone, every flicker of irritation before it became something larger. You learned to navigate their emotional weather the way a sailor learns the sea. Not because you wanted to, because you had to, because the cost of missing a signal was too high. You became a translator of their pain, even when that pain was aimed directly at you, even when you were the target and the caretaker. At the same time, you stopped asking for things because asking felt dangerous, because wanting something introduced the possibility of being refused. And a refusal in this relationship did not feel small. It felt like confirmation of every fear you carried. So you learned to need less, to say less, to feel less, or at least to perform feeling less. You got very good at telling yourself you were fine, and eventually the performance became so practiced that you could no longer easily tell where the performance ended and where you actually began. You told yourself you were too sensitive, you were overreacting. This is just love. No relationship is perfect. You should be grateful. And so slowly, without noticing, without meaning to, you disappeared. Because every time you silenced your own instincts to keep the peace, every time you overrode your own truth to manage someone else's comfort, you practiced abandoning yourself, not once, not twice, over and over again, until abandoning yourself became the reflex, until your own needs felt like an inconvenience, even to yourself, until the quiet voice inside you that used to say, "This doesn't feel right," became so faint you could no longer hear it at all. That is not a metaphor. That is a real thing that happens to real people, in real relationships, where love and pain live in the same house. You were not losing your mind. You were losing your access to yourself. And the cruelest part is how invisible that loss is to everyone around you, and eventually to you. If one more person had said, "Just leave," I think something in you might have simply stopped responding because they didn't understand what they were actually asking. They were asking you to walk away from a person, but what they didn't see was everything else you would be walking away from. The history, the language you had built together, the private jokes, the way they said your name, the memories stored in ordinary objects, in rooms, in song, in the smell of something that still stops you sometimes. The version of yourself that only existed with them. Who were you without this relationship? You genuinely didn't know, and that unknowing was not a small thing. That unknowing was terrifying because somewhere along the way, you had built your sense of self, partly around them, around being their person, around trying to reach them, around hoping things would get better. And leaving meant giving up the hope, not just the person, the hope that the version you fell for would come back for good this time, the hope that all the pain meant something, the hope that you were not spending your best years on something that would leave you empty. Humans do not let go of hope easily. We hold it long past reason, long past evidence, because the alternative is grief. And grief means it is really over. And if it is really over, then the suffering was real. And if the suffering was real, then it needs to be felt, all of it. And that is something the mind will avoid for as long as it possibly can. So you stayed, and you went back when you left, and you stayed again. And each time you felt the shame of it, the quiet, devastating shame of knowing what you know and still choosing what you chose. But I want to say something to that shame. It is lying to you. You were not weak. You were not foolish. You were not broken. You were attached. In the deepest way a person can be attached to something that felt like survival, and dismantling that is not a decision. It is a process, a long, non-linear, unglamorous process that no one prepares you for, and no one should judge you for, least of all yourself. Healing is not simple. Let me say that clearly, so no one misunderstands. It is not a decision you make one morning. It is not a quote you read that finally fixes everything. It is not a switch. It does not happen in a straight line. Some days you will feel like you have come so far, and other days, something small, a song, a smell, a certain quality of light in the afternoon will reach into your chest and remind you of how much you are still carrying, and that is allowed. That is not failure. That is what it actually looks like to heal from something real. But here is what I want you to hold. The part of you that kept hoping, the part that believed against all evidence that things could be different. That part is not broken. It is not naive. It is not your weakness. It is your capacity for love. And that capacity is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to be redirected, because you are capable of extraordinary love. The problem was never that you loved too much. The problem was that you loved someone who did not have the tools or the willingness to receive it with care. That is not your fault, and it does not mean you should close. It means you should become more careful about the doors you open. Not harder, Not colder, not less, more careful, more honest with yourself, earlier, more willing to trust the quiet discomfort in your body before it becomes a crisis in your life. Because your body knew, it always knows, before the mind catches up, before the reasons pile up, before it all becomes undeniable, the body already felt it. And learning to listen to that earlier, that is the work. Not dramatic, not loud, just quiet, honest, consistent attention to what is actually happening inside you. You are allowed to need consistency, to need honesty, to need someone who does not require you to be less so that they can feel like more. You are allowed to ask for what you need without apologizing for needing it. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to stop performing fine when you are not fine. You are allowed to stop disappearing, because the deepest pain in all of this was never only what they did to you. It was what you slowly, quietly learned to do to yourself in order to survive them. The criticism you internalized, the standards you abandoned, the dreams you quietly set aside, because keeping the peace required so much of your energy. There was nothing left. The version of yourself you postponed. Healing is returning to her, slowly, not all at once, not in one conversation, not with one decision, but in every quiet moment where you choose to tell yourself the truth. In every moment where you feel something and do not immediately explain it away. In every moment where you ask for what you need and do not apologize for asking. In every morning where you make one small choice that is for you, not for the peace, not for them, for you. That is the practice. That is the whole practice. Until one day, not all at once, but gradually, choosing yourself feels less like a revolution and more like simply coming home. That is the truth. The one I wanted you to hear today. And somewhere, very quietly, you already knew it. You just needed someone to say it out loud.